The email from Professor Martinez arrived on a Thursday evening while I was struggling through another calculus problem set. Jordan, I have an unusual modeling opportunity that pays well. Are you interested? I stared at the screen in my cramped dorm room at Portland State. Modeling? I'd signed up for Dr. Martinez's figure drawing class mostly because I needed an art credit, but somehow I'd become one of her better students. Still, I was 5'8" with sharp cheekbones and what my grandmother called pretty features, hardly the typical male model material. The next morning, I knocked on her office door. Professor Martinez looked up from a stack of charcoal drawings, her silver hair pulled back in its usual messy bun. Jordan, good, sit down. She gestured to the chair across from her cluttered desk. I have a private client, wealthy collector, very particular about his commissions. He's looking for someone androgynous for a series of classical poses. The pay is $300 an hour. My eyes widened. $300 would cover my textbooks for the semester. What exactly would I be modeling for? Figure studies, draped and undraped. But here's the thing. He specifically requested someone who could present as either masculine or feminine. When I saw your bone structure, I thought of you immediately. I shifted uncomfortably. I don't really know how to present as feminine. Professor Martinez smiled knowingly. That's where I come in. I used to work in theater costume design. If you're willing, I can help with that transformation. The word transformation sent an odd flutter through my chest. I'd always been curious about makeup, had sometimes wondered what I'd look like in different clothes, but had never had a reason to explore those thoughts. When would this be? This Saturday. We'd meet here at noon. I'd help you prepare. Then we'd go to his studio in the Pearl District. 4-hour session. $1,200. I nodded before I could overthink it. Saturday arrived gray and drizzly, typical for October in Portland. I met Professor Martinez in her office wearing jeans and a plain t-shirt, my dark hair still messy from sleep. Perfect canvas, she said, looking me over appraisingly. Come on, I've set up everything in the costume room. The theater department's costume room smelled like fabric softener and stage makeup. Racks of period clothing lined the walls, and a vanity with Hollywood-style lights dominated one corner. First, let's see what we're working with. She handed me a silk robe. Change into this, then we'll start with your hair. Standing in just the robe, I felt exposed and vulnerable. Professor Martinez worked quietly, running her fingers through my hair, pulling it different ways. You have beautiful hair, Jordan. Thick and naturally wavy. With the right cut and styling, it could be stunning either way. She wet my hair and began cutting, long pieces falling to the floor. I watched in the mirror as she shaped it into something softer, more layered. When she finished, she blow-dried it with careful attention, creating volume and movement I'd never achieved. Now for the fun part, she said, opening a tackle box filled with makeup. I'd never worn makeup before, not even for Halloween. The sensation of brushes against my skin was oddly soothing. Professor Martinez worked with the focused attention of an artist, explaining each step. Foundation to even your skin tone, concealer under the eyes. Now we'll define your features. You have naturally long lashes, which is lucky. The mascara wand felt strange against my eyelids, but when I opened my eyes, they looked dramatically different, larger, more expressive. Eyeliner next. Hold still. The pencil traced along my lash line, making my eyes appear even more striking. Then came eyeshadow and soft, neutral tones that made my green eyes pop. Your lips are already well-shaped, so just a little gloss. When she finally turned me toward the mirror, I gasped. The face looking back at me was unmistakably mine, but transformed, refined, beautiful even. How do you feel? Different, but not wrong, if that makes sense. She smiled. It makes perfect sense. Now for clothes. She'd selected a simple black dress with clean lines, nothing too feminine or dramatic. As I slipped it on, the fabric felt like water against my skin. It fit perfectly, skimming my slim frame in a way that created subtle curves. Shoes next. The heels were low, just 2 inches, but they changed everything about how I moved. I had to think about each step, hold myself differently. Walk around. Get used to how it feels. I took tentative steps across the room, gradually finding my balance. The swish of fabric against my legs, the click of heels on linoleum, everything felt heightened, more deliberate. You're natural, she said, and I felt an unexpected surge of pride. The client studio was in a converted warehouse, all exposed brick and enormous windows. Marcus Brennan was probably 60, with kind eyes and paint-stained fingers. He showed no surprise at my appearance, just professional appreciation. "Excellent bone structure," he murmured, circling me like I was a sculpture. "Yes, this will work beautifully." The first pose was simple, sitting on a velvet chair, the dress arranged to suggest classical drapery. As I held the position, I became intensely aware of my body, of how the fabric felt against my skin, of the way the light caught the subtle makeup Professor Martinez had applied. "Lovely," he said, his charcoal moving across the paper in quick, confident strokes. "You have natural grace." We worked for 2 hours before taking a break. As I stretched, Professor Martinez handed me a bottle of water. "How are you feeling?" "Good. Strange, but good." I paused, trying to articulate something I barely understood myself. "I feel more visible somehow, like I'm seeing myself clearly for the first time." She nodded knowingly. "Sometimes we need to step outside our familiar selves to understand who we really are." For the afternoon session, Marcus wanted different poses, more flowing, more expressive. As I moved between positions, I found myself inhabiting this new version of myself more fully. The initial self-consciousness had faded, replaced by something that felt like discovery. "That's it," Marcus said suddenly. "Hold that exact expression." I was looking toward the window, afternoon light casting shadows across my face. In that moment, I felt truly beautiful, not performing femininity, but embodying something authentic and new. When the session ended, Marcus handed me an envelope thick with cash and shook my hand warmly. "I'd love to work with you again. You have a rare quality. You're not just posing, you're inhabiting the art." Walking back to Professor Martinez's car, I caught my reflection in storefront windows. The person looking back still seemed like a beautiful stranger. "So," she said as we drove through downtown traffic, "what did you learn today?" I considered the question seriously. That I can be more than one thing. That maybe the person I thought I was is just one possibility. She smiled. "And how does that feel?" "Terrifying, admittedly, but also exciting." Back in the costume room, I sat at the vanity removing makeup with cold cream, watching this other version of myself gradually disappear. But something fundamental had shifted. I could still feel the memory of that grace, that beauty, that different way of moving through the world. "Jordan," Professor Martinez said as I prepared to leave, "you don't have to choose. Identity isn't binary. You can be both, or neither, or something entirely new." Walking across campus in my regular clothes, I felt like I was carrying a secret. Not a shameful one, but something precious and privately mine. Students passed by, seeing the same person they'd always seen, but I knew better now. That night, I stood in front of my dorm room mirror, running my fingers through my newly cut hair. The face looking back was familiar again, but changed somehow. More open, more alive. My phone buzzed with a text from Professor Martinez. "Marcus wants to book you for next month. Interested?" I stared at the message for a long moment, thinking about that feeling of inhabiting art, of being truly seen, about the possibility that maybe I didn't have to choose between different versions of myself. "Yes," I typed back. "Definitely yes." Later, lying in bed, I thought about transformation and identity, about the strange courage it had taken to let someone remake me, even temporarily. I thought about Professor Martinez's words, that sometimes we need to step outside our familiar selves to understand who we really are. Maybe she was right. Maybe today hadn't been about becoming someone else at all, but about discovering parts of myself that had always been there, waiting.